On a quiet autumn evening, when the city lights glowed like distant stars, a man sat alone at a small cafe table. His name was Richard Haleman, known for his wealth, his power, and the way he carried himself with calm authority. The world often looked at him and saw only success, but in truth, Richard's heart had long grown tired. He had the finest meals, the best wine, and a life most people would only dream of, yet none of it filled the emptiness inside him. That evening, he was only half listening to the music drifting from the cafe's speakers. His mind wandered, his fork rested on his plate, and his eyes stared past the crowd without truly seeing them. But then, something shifted. Across the street, in the shadows of a flickering street lamp, a young woman stood. Her coat was thin, her shoes worn, and her hands trembled as she clutched them together. She wasn't begging, she wasn't shouting, she was simply staring at his unfinished meal, as though it were the most precious treasure in the world. And when her timid voice finally broke the silence, Richard's life began to change forever. "Sir," she whispered, her voice almost lost in the wind, "may I have your leftovers?" Richard blinked, unsure if he had heard her correctly. The words were simple, yet they carried a weight that silenced the clinking of glasses and the quiet chatter around him. "May I have your leftovers, sir?" she repeated, her voice trembling, though her eyes held a quiet dignity. He studied her for a moment. She was not like the beggars who sometimes crowded the streets, shouting for coins or chasing after hurried businessmen. No, this young woman spoke softly, almost apologetically, as if she hated to ask, but hunger had left her no choice. Richard's first instinct was confusion. He had never been approached this way before. People asked him for money, for favors, for opportunities, but never for something as humble as what remained on his plate. The waiter took a cautious step forward, whispering, "Sir, I can have her removed if you'd like." But Richard raised his hand gently. His gaze never left her face. There was something there, something raw, something honest that unsettled him in a way nothing else had in years. "What is your name?" he asked quietly. The young woman hesitated, her fingers tightening around the edge of her coat. "My name is Anna," she whispered, "and I haven't eaten since yesterday." Her voice cracked on the last word, and for the first time in a long while, Richard's heart stirred. For a long moment, silence hung between them. Richard could see the hesitation in Anna's eyes, the way she shifted her weight from one foot to the other, torn between hunger and pride. "Sit," he said gently, motioning toward the empty chair across from him. His voice carried no judgment, only calm certainty. Anna's lips parted slightly, as though she wanted to refuse, but her body betrayed her hunger. Slowly, cautiously, she pulled the chair back and lowered herself onto it. She kept her gaze fixed on the table, too nervous to meet his eyes. The waiter, still lingering nearby, raised an eyebrow in disbelief. Richard only gave a firm nod, and the waiter reluctantly stepped away. Anna's hands trembled as she reached for the bread, breaking off the smallest piece, as though she feared taking too much. She chewed carefully, almost reverently, as though even this simple food was a gift beyond measure. Richard watched her closely. Every bite seemed to unravel a story she wasn't telling. Her thin frame, the shadows beneath her eyes, the way she paused between bites, as though to stretch the moment, it all spoke of struggles no one had cared to notice. "You don't need to be shy," he said at last. "Eat as much as you need." Anna's eyes lifted just slightly, and for the first time, Richard caught a glimpse of gratitude, soft, fragile, and real. The bread was gone quickly, and Anna moved to the small piece of steak left on the plate. She cut it carefully, almost ceremoniously, as though she had been taught long ago to respect food, no matter how little there was. Richard did not speak, not yet. He simply watched, his expression calm, patient. For years, people had spoken to him with rehearsed words, pitching ideas, asking favors, flattering his name. But here, across from him, was someone whose silence was heavier, more honest, than any speech he had ever heard. Finally, Anna swallowed and placed her fork down. She glanced up, almost shyly, and said, "Thank you, sir. I didn't mean to trouble you. I just couldn't walk past any longer." Richard tilted his head slightly. "You haven't troubled me. Tell me, where do you live? Asterisk, her fingers tightened around the edge of her coat. For a moment, she seemed ready to remain silent. Then, in a small voice, she answered, nowhere permanent. Sometimes a shelter, sometimes not. It depends on the night. Asterisk, Richard felt a quiet ache in his chest, an unfamiliar weight pressing against years of hardened detachment. Asterisk, why do you not ask for help? He asked gently. Asterisk, Anna's lips curved in the faintest, bittersweet smile. Because most people don't really want to listen. Asterisk, and for the first time in a long time, Richard realized he did. Asterisk, Richard lifted his hand and gestured toward the waiter, who had been hovering nearby, uncertain. Asterisk, bring her a meal, Richard said firmly, something warm, and make it enough for her to eat slowly, not scraps too. Finish quickly. Asterisk, the waiter hesitated, then nodded and hurried away. Anna's eyes widened, her lips parting in surprise. Oh no, sir. I didn't mean for you to spend money. Just a little bread was more than enough. Asterisk, but Richard stopped her with a quiet look. You don't need to explain. Everyone deserves to eat. Asterisk, within minutes, steaming dishes began to appear. A bowl of soup, a plate of pasta, freshly baked bread. The scents rose gently in the cool air, and Anna's breath caught. She stared at the table as though it were an impossible dream. Asterisk, her fingers trembled when she lifted the spoon. She sipped carefully, and warmth spread through her body, chasing away the cold that had settled deep in her bones. Tears gathered in her eyes, but she blinked them back, determined to keep her dignity. Asterisk, Richard leaned back in his chair, watching quietly. He wasn't thinking about the cost, nor about appearances. What struck him most was how someone could look so grateful for something so simple. Asterisk, for the first time in years, he felt the faint spark of purpose. Asterisk, the soup was half finished when Anna finally spoke again. Her voice was quiet, almost fragile, as though each word carried the weight of years unspoken. Asterisk, I used to have a home, she began, her eyes fixed on the steam rising from the bowl. A small one. It wasn't much, but it was mine. I worked at a bakery. I loved the smell of bread in the mornings. Asterisk, Richard listened without interruption, his hands folded neatly on the table. Asterisk, but then, she continued, the bakery closed. The owner couldn't keep it running. I searched for other work, but, one by one, the doors closed before me. She gave a faint, rueful smile. It's easy to fall behind. Rent piles up. Bills don't wait. Before you know it, you're outside, looking in. Her fingers tightened around the spoon as though it were an anchor. Richard felt a heaviness stir within him. He had never known that kind of loss. To him, homes, businesses, opportunities, they had always been numbers on a page, decisions to make, investments to shift. But hearing it in her trembling voice, it became something else entirely. Asterisk, Anna glanced at him then, as if bracing for pity, but she found only steady eyes, waiting, willing to listen. Asterisk, and in that silence, she realized, he truly wanted to hear her story. Asterisk, as Anna spoke, Richard found himself falling strangely silent inside. Her words drifted into him like echoes, in a vast, empty hall. Asterisk, he had spent his entire life gathering wealth, gathering influence, gathering recognition, and yet, for all his possessions, there was a hollowness he could not deny. Asterisk, every evening he dined at expensive tables. Every morning he awoke in a house far too large for one man. His phone never stopped ringing, but when it did, the silence felt unbearable. Asterisk, and here, across from him, was a woman with nothing, no home, no safety, no certainty for tomorrow. Yet in her voice was something he had long forgotten, resilience. She spoke not with bitterness, but with a fragile kind of strength. Asterisk, Richard studied her face. Her cheeks were hollow, her hair unkempt, but her eyes carried a light that unsettled him. They were not pleading eyes. They were eyes that had endured. Asterisk, he realized, with a quiet jolt, that for all his wealth, he had never tasted the rawness of survival. He had never been forced to cling to hope when everything else was gone. Asterisk, and for the first time in years, Richard felt the sharp edge of ember not for her hardships, but for the strange, unyielding strength they had carved into her spirit. Asterisk, Anna set her fork down slowly. For a moment, she stared at her hands, as though searching for the courage to continue. When she finally spoke, her voice carried a tremor. Asterisk, I wasn't always alone, she whispered. I had a mother, She used to tell me that no matter how little we had, we should always share what we could. She'd give half her meal to a neighbor without hesitation. Her lips curved in the faintest smile, then faltered, but she grew ill, and medicine costs more than kindness can cover. Richard's chest tightened as she paused, swallowing hard before continuing. She passed away last winter. I couldn't even afford a proper burial. Just a small service, nothing more. Her fingers traced the edge of the plate absently, as though clinging to something she could not hold anymore. Since then, it's just been me, trying to find work, trying to keep moving. Some nights I wonder if people even see me at all. Richard's throat felt dry. He had attended grand funerals with hundreds of flowers, where sorrow was hidden beneath polished speeches. Yet here sat a young woman who had buried the only family she had, with nothing but her hands, her heart, and her quiet strength. And suddenly, Richard realized how little he had truly understood about loss. Richard exhaled slowly, his gaze never leaving Anna's. For years, he had signed checks to charities, funded shelters, donated to from a distance, yet here, for the first time, the need was not a statistic or a stranger on paper. It was a face, a voice, a life, sitting across from him. Anna, he said gently, you shouldn't have to wander from shelter to shelter. You shouldn't have to wonder where your next meal will come from. Her brows furrowed slightly, suspicion flickering in her tired eyes. Sir, I didn't come here to ask for money. I only needed a little food. I know, Richard replied softly, and that is why I believe you deserve more. He paused, choosing his words carefully. If you're willing, I'd like to help you. Not with just tonight's dinner, but with something real work, a place to stay, a chance to stand on your own again. Anna's spoon froze midway to her lips. She lowered it slowly, her breath catching as though she had misheard. Work, a place, to stay. Richard nodded. His voice carried no pity, only quiet resolve. Everyone deserves a chance to begin again. For the first time that evening, Anna's eyes shone not just with gratitude, but with the faint spark of hope. For a long moment, Anna said nothing. The cafe noises seemed to fade, the world narrowing to the quiet space between them. Her hands twisted together in her lap, fingers knotting nervously, as though she could hold her fear inside them. I don't know if I can believe that, she whispered at last. Her eyes lifted, searching his face. People don't usually mean it when they say they'll help. Sometimes they promise, but then they disappear. And I can't afford to believe in things that vanish. Richard's chest tightened at the raw honesty in her words. He had heard negotiations worth millions, seen people barter and plead, but nothing struck him as deeply as the trembling in her voice. I understand, he said quietly. Trust isn't built in a moment. I don't expect you to trust me right away. Anna's eyes glistened, uncertainty swimming within them. Then why? Why would you help me? You don't even know me. Richard leaned forward slightly, his voice steady, deliberate. Because once, a stranger helped me, and it changed the course of my life. Now, perhaps, it is my turn to do the same. Anna drew in a shaky breath. For the first time, her guarded expression softened just enough for a sliver of hope to slip through. The meal ended quietly, with no more words than needed. When they stepped outside, the night air wrapped around them like a cool blanket. The cafe lights glowed behind them, fading as they began to walk side by side. Anna pulled her coat tightly across her chest, her step small and cautious. She kept just enough distance, as though afraid that if she walked too close, the moment might shatter. Richard walked with an easy steadiness, his hands resting in his coat pockets. He did not rush her, did not press her with questions. He simply matched his stride to hers, letting silence speak where words might intrude. Finally, Anna broke the quiet. Where are we going? Somewhere safe, Richard replied calmly. I know a place. A friend of mine runs a small guest house. It's quiet and clean. You'll have a bed tonight. Anna's breath caught. A bed, the word itself. It felt like a luxury, too distant to grasp. She turned her face slightly, searching his profile. And tomorrow, she asked softly. Richard glanced at her, his eyes steady. Tomorrow, we talk about work, about beginning again. Asterisk Anna's steps faltered for just a moment, her heart pounding. She wanted to believe him. She wanted to trust. Asterisk, but trust, she knew, was something that had to grow one step at a time. Asterisk, the guest house was quiet, its hallways lined with warm lamps that cast a gentle glow across polished wood floors. Richard walked Anna to a small room near the end of the corridor, opening the door with a calm gesture. Asterisk inside was nothing extravagant, just a bed neatly made with clean sheets, a small nightstand, and a lamp that filled the space with soft light. But to Anna, it might as well have been a palace. Asterisk, she froze at the doorway, unable to move. Her hands clutched her worn coat as if it were the only thing tethering her to reality. Asterisk, this is for me, she whispered. Asterisk Richard gave a simple nod. Yes, tonight, it's yours. Asterisk her eyes shimmered, her lips trembling as though she wanted to say more, but couldn't find the words. Slowly, she stepped inside, reaching out to touch the blanket with hesitant fingers, as though she feared it might vanish at her touch. Asterisk, I haven't. She paused, swallowing hard. I haven't slept in a bed in months. Asterisk Richard's chest tightened at the quiet truth in her voice. He didn't respond with words, only with silence, giving her the space to feel the moment fully. Asterisk for Anna, the room was more than shelter. It was a reminder that kindness still existed, and perhaps a beginning she never thought possible. Asterisk the first rays of morning slipped through the curtains, brushing the room with soft light. Anna sat on the edge of the bed, her bare feet resting lightly on the floor. She had slept, really slept, for the first time in months, but even now, a quiet unease lingered in her chest. Asterisk, what if it was all a dream? What if she stepped outside, and the world claimed her back again, the same cold streets waiting to swallow her whole? Asterisk, she ran her fingers across the blanket, half afraid it would vanish beneath her touch. Asterisk, the door creaked open, and Richard stepped inside. He carried himself with the same calm steadiness as the night before, though now a faint warmth touched his expression. In his hand was a small folder. Asterisk, good morning, Anna, he said gently. Asterisk, she looked up, startled by how natural his voice sounded, as though he had spoken her name many times before. Good morning, she murmured, her tone uncertain. Asterisk Richard set the folder on the small desk by the bed. I made a few calls this morning. There's a place that needs help, part-time work, steady pay. I thought you might be interested. Asterisk Anna's eyes widened, her heart stumbling over itself. Work, not pity, not charity, an opportunity. Anna opened the folder slowly, her fingers trembling as though she feared the paper inside might crumble. There, neatly printed, was a simple job offer: dishwashing and light kitchen work at a small restaurant across town. Nothing grand, nothing glamorous, but steady, real. Asterisk her throat tightened. Is this truly for me? She whispered. Asterisk Richard nodded once. If you want it. I made sure they'd give you a fair chance. No questions you don't want to answer, just honest work. Asterisk Anna's vision blurred as tears welled up, though she blinked them back quickly. I don't understand. Why would you do this for me? I was just a stranger asking for scraps. Asterisk Richard's gaze softened, his voice calm but firm. Because sometimes strangers carry stories worth hearing, and because I see someone who hasn't given up, even when life gave her every reason to. Asterisk her breath caught, the words sinking deep. For so long, the world had looked past her, treating her as invisible. And now, here was a man who not only saw her, but believed she could rise again. Asterisk, Anna clutched the folder tightly against her chest, as though it were the most precious thing she had ever held. Asterisk, and for the first time in years, she allowed herself to believe maybe her life could change. Asterisk weeks later, the clatter of dishes and the smell of food filled the small restaurant kitchen. Anna stood at the sink, sleeves rolled up, her hands steady as she worked. The apron she wore was clean, her hair tied back neatly. There was no hesitation in her movements, now only quiet determination. Asterisk, to anyone passing by, she might have looked like just another worker, but to Richard, watching from the doorway, she was proof of something far greater. Asterisk, he hadn't rescued her. He hadn't handed her riches or erased her past. All he had given her was a chance. The rest her strength, her perseverance, her been there all along, waiting to be seen. Asterisk Anna glanced up and caught his eye. For a brief moment, their gazes held, and she offered him a small, genuine smile. It wasn't the smile of someone indebted. It was the smile of someone beginning again. Richard felt something stir within him, something he had almost forgotten. Not pride, not accomplishment, but meaning. And as he stepped quietly back into the street, he realized the miracle was not that he had given her food, or even work. The miracle was that, in her eyes, he had rediscovered his own humanity. Sometimes, the smallest acts, a meal shared, a hand extended, carried the power to change two lives at once.